Wealth is more than money. It's legacy, wisdom, and the alignment of purpose. Welcome to Crown and Keys, where we unlock the secrets to generational wealth, passive income, and financial freedom through real estate, tax strategy, and personal development. I'm your host, Cynthia Spirlin, your guide on this journey. With over 20 years in real estate investing, a Juris Doctorate, and the passion for aligning wealth with purpose, I bring you conversations with the most brilliant minds in real estate, finance, and entrepreneurship. Together, we'll uncover the strategies that turn income into impact and assets into legacy. Your wealth isn't just for you, it's for the generations that follow. So grab your keys, adjust your crown, and let's build something that lasts. Good morning and welcome to Crown and Keys. This is a podcast for those interested in creating generational wealth through real estate investing. And I'm so excited today about our guest, David Baird of Las Vegas. He has such a rich background in real estate, and his emphasis for years has been in commercial real estate. So actually, he's with the Spirlin Commercial Global Affiliates and has 40 years experience in commercial real estate industry, specializing in institutional, multifamily, and senior housing sectors, which senior housing sectors is a very hot area right now. I see so much about that in the news. So today we're going to talk about his experience and how he's seen and helped many investors and many of his clients build amazing portfolios and create generational wealth. So welcome, David.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. We met recently at an event, a wine tasting subject around real estate and wealth. And I was so interested in a story that you told about a deal you did years ago that involved blue sapphires. Why don't we start with that juicy little experience in your past?
It's definitely an experience. I've been through several recessions. I'm an experienced recession broker. This really happened back in the 80s, in the early 80s. The market was in really bad shape. I owned a couple of residential real estate offices at the time, and I was doing business with a lender, a hard money lender, who was taking back some of his properties. And so I had a listing from him on a piece of residential property. Now, back at that time, interest rates were crazy. There was absolutely no money available for anything. The FHA VA rate was at 16%. I was actually building some condos at the time, and my construction loan was 23%.
Ooh.
It was the first loan, my first syndication, and the first loan for that particular bank. We ended up getting out of that deal with nobody making any money, but nobody losing any money. So that was a win for me at that time. But to go further there, at that time, that was the crossover between Reagan and Carter. We used to get interest rate cards, little factor cards from the title companies, and they would give you a factor to multiply times 1,000 to get your monthly payment back then. And so I had one of those cards. I wish I'd kept it. It started at 12%, went to 24%. So you just weren't getting exactly. And so there was just no money available out there at any price. I mean, who could afford to pay 20% for a loan? We had loans back then. We called them 2020s, 20% interest and 20 points.
Ooh.
Yeah, 20% interest, 20 points. That was the market we were in. So people were coming up with there was just creative ways to do real estate back then. And so to finish my story about the investor that I had this property listed, it was vacant, and we got an offer to buy the property, and the offer was with 20% down, but the money was actually in precious stones. So what they would do was they would take, they would have these precious stones, they'd have them appraised, and try to use those as the down payment. And so my investor actually took the deal with the precious stones. When it came time for my commission, his comment was, Dave, if I get precious stones, you get precious stones. So I got a whole bunch of sapphires for my commission, which I couldn't eat, obviously, couldn't make my payments with, but what are you going to do? There was nothing else out there.
You
So
just made it
I ended up
happen.
taking all these. Yeah, I mean, it was just crazy because the market, they were using diamonds and sapphires and emeralds and you name it. All of these stones had flooded the market. And that was what was making residential real estate work. I had two offices at the time, residential offices, and I had about 60 people working for me. And at the end of the day, pretty much it was just me. Nobody could
Yeah.
make a living, so a lot of them just kind of shut it down. And we
Oh,
did a lot of creative financing at the time, and that precious stones were part of that creative financing. And I mean, it was really creative. We were doing some of the things we had to do to make a deal work were crazy. And at the same time, I was trying to do that. We were also, well, I also had a mortgage company that I owned besides the real estate companies, and none of them made any money. It was
none of
just, it
them.
was a crazy time. It was, well, some things that you learn in the business,
Yeah.
there are old investors and bold investors, but there are no old, bold investors. So,
Well, what do you think about that market compared to what's going on now? Because I hear the same comment. You're talking about 20%, 25% interest and 2020, and now 7% people are crying at 7%. So, what do you tell people now when that market to this market, and a lot of real estate agents are struggling to stay in the business now?
well, I think that, when I see a 7% interest rate, I just kind of laugh because that was nothing. It was pretty easy. But I think the adage that I've heard, and I'm sure you have, well aware of it also, is that, marry your house and date your mortgage. And so you have to take a look at what the long term interest, I mean, even if for the short term or the long term. Right
Mhm.
now, what's killing people, I specialize in large multifamily. What's killing the multifamily industry right now is low interest rates.
Is it really?
And well, here's the problem. Okay, so about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the market was booming. We had like zero interest; it was really low. People were buying these multifamily properties at 3 and 4% interest. Well, guess what? 5 years later, the loans due, and interest rates are at 7, and you've got a
Oh,
3% loan.
yeah.
Well, in commercial real estate, and they don't look at the loan to value; they look at the debt coverage ratio. How
Right.
much cash do you have to cover the debt? And if you want to refinance, your loan's going to come out a whole lot smaller than the loan you currently have on the property.
Mm.
So, and the lenders are not really working with you per se to get this done. There's a big backlog. There are literally about $6 trillion worth of loans that are coming due in the commercial market right now. And
Mhm.
most of them, office is a good example. The office properties, because of not only the interest rates, but because of remote workers, they're
Yes.
vacant. There's no cash flow
Right.
to make those properties work. And so they can't do much with it. Well, in commercial, you can basically, they have carve outs, but you can hand back the keys without
Mm.
having a default judgment against you. The problem with that is you'll never get another commercial loan. When the
Oh,
lender sees you handed a property back, you're done.
yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
Start doing something else.
Oh my goodness. So what's the solution?
Well, the solution right now is actually what I'm doing right now is working distressed properties. I'm working the
Okay.
distressed portion of it. So here's a good example of what's happening. Back in 2016, 17, 18, there was a large company up here that was buying up multifamily. They literally have about probably 5,000 units in Las Vegas.
Mm.
And the problem is they over leveraged it. In other words, they got in with as little money down as possible. And when I first got into business, I thought that was a great idea. I mean, if you take $100,000 house and put $5,000 down,
Yeah.
your return based on leverage is incredible. The problem is when a recession comes along,
Mm.
now you're out of business,
Right.
and you can't make it work. So over leveraging, which is what this company did, they over leveraged their portfolio that they were buying, and they couldn't refinance out of it. And now they're going to file bankruptcy without.
Oh,
They've got not only units in Vegas, but in, I mean, also licensed in Arizona and California, and their portfolio is mostly Nevada, Arizona, Texas. Okay, so they can't do anything with it. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they say, "Well, I have a really good relationship with the lender." Well, the answer is no. The answer is no, you don't,
no, you
because
don't.
no, you don't, because where's the lender's interest? The lender's interest in who they got the money from.
Yeah.
You know, it may be from a large pool of investors, and the lender, the person you're talking to, is not the one that holds the loan.
Right. It's not right. Yeah.
No, so their allegiance is to their investors, not to you.
Right.
You know,
Exactly. Oh.
so
So
it's
so
good.
this case, distressed property, you take this client and find a new buyer that's a better heeled to take over this property, like a
Well,
foreclosure,
exactly. And,
a pre-foreclosure.
once it goes to foreclosure, we want to get it before it goes to
Right.
foreclosure.
Like that's where
Because
it's at
what
right now.
happens is, right, well, what happens is that you know, when you get these loans, the same thing happens to residential on a smaller scale,
Sure.
but they pool these loans into a big pool. You know, I mean, you might have gotten a loan from Wells Fargo, but Wells Fargo probably sold that loan in the secondary market
Sure.
to a large pool, and they're part of a large pool.
Okay.
And so we have to go after what they call the CMBS, which is a commercial, you know, which is a commercial term for this pool, CMBS, or, you know, there's a lot of different acronyms you can use with it.
Yeah.
Fannie and Freddie too, you know,
Sure.
do the same scenario, FHA. So they're into a big pool. So you can't just pick that loan out of the pool. It's got to be some kind of distress or a special
Okay.
servicer.
I see.
So that's kind of what happens to them. And so I've formed a team, and I have, you know, about 8 different entities on this team, and one of them is a girl that does negotiation. It's not like the short sales from back in the day. It's someone who actually negotiates with CMBS and the special servicer to make it work. So
Sure.
if we can't work it, the problem is you can't always work a deal with the owner, because here's an example. So let's say you bought a property that was, and here's a sample of one I did. You bought a property, the loan on the property was $100 million. Okay. Well, what happens is you go back and appraise the property in today's numbers. So they bought it when the numbers were 3% interest rate or 3.5% interest rate. Today it's 7. So the lender or the special servicer is going to look at that property in today's number and say, okay, that property has to underwrite on today's numbers, and the loan to value has nothing to do with it. It's a matter of the debt coverage ratio, which is how much money is left after paying the mortgage. Okay,
Sure.
we call it DCR. Okay, so on this particular deal, there was a $100 million loan. So we offered the client, even though it was a $100 million loan, we offered him to buy the property at $80 million and give him $1 million to walk away. And he turned it down, which was unfortunate for him. So then what we have to do, if he had accepted that, then we go to the CMBS special servicer and negotiate that loan down so the purchase can take place.
Right.
So the buyer, I mean, if you're a buyer in today's market, whether you're buying a house or a strip center or a multifamily property, you're looking at what's it worth today and today's numbers. Okay. So like I say, a lot of homes go on, you know, a home loan as an example will go on loan to value, and it still comes down to debt coverage because they want to know how you qualify based on the price of the house and the amount of debt that you have, your ratios, you know, your income ratio to the debt. Well, it really, they take that part out of it for commercial, and they look at how does the property qualify?
Support itself.
Exactly. So when you're talking about distressed properties, you have to take a look at what the lender's going to do. So maybe they want to extend the loan for a year.
Yeah. What's
the lender going to do? They're going to say, okay, we may extend it for a year, but first let's take a look at the value of the property. Then we're going to take a look at how much more money are you going to put into it? Because they're going to want to see some skin in the game again. Not only that, they're going to want you to fix any deferred maintenance on the property, and they're going to want some reserves. So maybe you've got a $25 million loan coming due, and based on the underwriting criteria, it'll only support a $20 million loan. So let's say they extend you for a year. They're going to say, okay, I want you to put in another $2 million, and I want you to fix all the deferred maintenance, and I want some extra money in there for reserve for other payments. And we'll give you a year. What's going to happen in a year? Well, if the market hasn't improved sufficiently, you do it all over again. And how long does it take you to get
down the can? Pushing that can down the road.
They're calling it extend and pretend or delay and pray, whatever form fits. That's what the lenders were. Now they're at a point that they're tired of that. Lenders are tired of doing it. I say lenders, but special servicers. So where are you going to be in a year? So a lot of people just can't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and if that's true, let's say you put 20% down on this property, and now it's worth 20 million less than the loan amount, or $10 million less than the loan amount.
Right.
So you're actually, after your 20%, and now that your property's underwater, you put more money into it. When are you going to get that? How long does it take to get the money you spent back, and how does that affect your return?
Right. Especially, do you see the buildings filling up again and workers coming back to work in offices, or?
You know, that's the only problem we're having with that is with office. And Las Vegas is a very unique market. We're not having a problem as much with office today as the rest of the country is. Actually, the Vegas market for multifamily, as an example, is the number one market in the country right now, which is good and bad. It's bad because if you're trying to sell something, the seller's expectations are huge. And the buyers are still, there's still a disconnect between buyer and seller in pretty much all the property types.
So what would you recommend for someone that wants to build wealth in this phase of the market based on your experience in past recessions? How do you play the long game so that you can actually not lose everything in a recession period?
Well, I think the first thing you need to remember is that the loan is really going to decide what's going to happen with that property. So the lender can be your friend and your enemy. You know, he's your friend when you're buying and he's your enemy when you're selling.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that can go wrong in there. As an example, what I stated is over-leveraging. Over-leveraging will come back to bite you almost every time because you just can't call when a recession is going to hit. An example, during the Great Recession, you know, I saw it coming in like 07. It took me a while to figure that one out. But in 07, I saw this coming. So I started to pull back on my own investments, but I couldn't pull back enough. And so I got hurt during the big one, like everybody else did.
Yeah.
You know, but it was the market was crazy. And I would just say, don't buy into the craziness. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, Warren Buffett, you know, you buy on fear and you sell on optimism, you know, and that's kind of what you have to take a look at. And I'll give you an example. During why the lender can come back and bite you. During the Great Recession, we had a client that we saw that owned about $100 million worth of retail properties in Las Vegas. We went to see him, and he said, here's the keys, just take it. The bank won't even take it back from me because it's not worth the loan amount. So the bank doesn't want it on their books. So what you have to take a look at today is position yourself conservatively so that when those opportunities come along, you have some leverage. You have some ways to purchase it. Don't buy everything highly leveraged because you're going to get bit. So the investors that I've worked with in the past are all, for the most part, long-term investors, and they're friends. So it's so much easier to do business with friends. And the friends that I work with, you know, you watch what they do, and you learn from their failures and their successes. So don't get to yourself to a point that you're, you know, it's kind of like sometimes a kid in a candy store, or it can be when the market's really good, and you're out buying and making money, and everything's great. I can tell you that short-term gains are a lot of fun. But then what do you do with the money?
Yeah.
Are you going to roll it in and take another chance on it? You're going to pay taxes on it? I think to make money in the real estate business, whether you're an agent, agents turn into owners, you know, if you're doing it right. So if you're selling a deal, try and take a piece of your commission, but not all of it in the deal. If your investor will allow you, put part of it in. Don't put more than half of your commission into a deal, because if you put it all in and the market turns, now you go from driving a Mercedes to driving a Volkswagen.
Right. Yeah. That's great advice. Over looking at the market, you definitely say that Vegas is a unique market. So you really doesn't translate to other areas. Like California, what's happening in California with the fires and all the things. I mean, that market is a really tough market too. I have a property for sale right now. We went into escrow with a cash investor, and it's like, you know, every day it's just like biting your nails going, okay, you know, but I think we're okay, but I'm glad that we got this before all of the things started going wrong. Like we went into escrow before, but now that we're into 30 days into the new year, things are changing on a daily basis. So, but because you're in the distress market, are you the buyers local that are investors buying the locally, or these out-of-state buyers continuing to buy into Las Vegas?
They are a lot. Like I said, Las Vegas is a hot market right now. California, and that's where I started my real estate career, was in California.
Yeah.
So I've known the market, but California will always come back.
Okay.
California is not really a state; it's a country next door to us. I mean, they've got with 33 million people, they've got more than the population of Canada in California.
Yeah.
So it'll always come back, and the distress is not huge in California.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason is there's so much money there. There's so much international money in California.
Okay.
It's a huge market. And if you take a look at what happened with the fires as an example, that's going to cause more of a boom in real estate than a depression. Where are those people going to go? They've got to have a place to live.
Sure.
I was just reading an article this morning that it's hard to find a large apartment, like a 3-bedroom, because people that got burned out moved into an apartment. So you really can't find a large apartment. If you own a home, how long? They were just talking this morning. I was watching the business channel, and they were saying that it'll be, before California can come back, it'll be 10 to 15 years before that can be rebuilt. That's just the way the name of the game in California. I mean, I would, just my guess is totally off the hip, but I would think a lot of the stuff along the coastline not going to be rebuilt. They're going to want to leave it open for public access. So, although, and on top of that, a lot of those people didn't have insurance. The insurance industry pulled out of California because they capped the insurance, so they just pulled out.
Oh,
so so the market in California, I think, is going to be fine. A lot of that market, a lot of those people, investors, homeowners, etc., moving to Vegas.
Yeah,
we're the closest state.
I believe it.
Yep, we're coming here.
Yeah. And it makes sense because even still, the market is high in Vegas, but it's still lower than California. So they can come and buy, what they had, similar or better, or buy two,
Exactly. And the same thing's happening with investors. A lot of what you're competing with in the residential market is not only other home buyers, but also institutional buyers.
Yes.
The Blackstones, those kind of people coming and buying in large swaths of residential to rent out and return. That's a phenomenon that started about 10 plus years ago, maybe 15 years ago. They started buying huge swaths of homes in Nevada, which is driving up prices.
Okay. Yeah. Across the country, we're seeing the average home price is $450,000. So what would you say to a young person, 30 to 40 years old, starting his family or her family, and what's the next step to building wealth given the climate that we're in right now?
Well, the first step in building wealth is buying a home. I mean, in all honesty, and watching the appreciation, when I first started, I was of that attitude too. I was a young guy going, okay, I'm going to buy a house, and then I'm going to refinance it. I'm going to buy a rental, and I'm going to refinance that and buy two rentals. That whole scenario, which works really well until a recession hits.
Right.
And then then you're holding the bag with all of these properties, and it gets crazy, And if you take a look at what the recession effect on people, you've got to be able to ride the storm. You have to be able, instead of buying two houses with it, buy one with a lot lower leverage. Yes. And then when you get ready to do something, do the same thing. It's a slower build, but it's a more steady build.
Absolutely. What do you think about seller financing if you buy into a seller financing opportunity to grow a portfolio? Do you advise that?
Sure. Typically, seller financing is a lot easier. It's easier to get, not only the seller to finance it, but the returns are good. The problem is the seller's going to want his money.
Yeah.
They're not going to seldom does a seller extend. If you take a look back and see, when the loan comes due, they want their money. They don't want to extend.
Yeah.
And so they're at the point of saying, I'm just going to foreclose it out. Or as a lender may very well extend, your chances are better with the lender extending than with the owner extending.
Okay. But if you like right now in this recession period that we're experiencing in some parts of the country, if you were to do a seller financing with a 5-year window where you could refinance out of that in 5 years, do you think that'll be enough time to get past this climate right now?
Yeah, I mean, interest rates are going to take a long time to come down. They're not just going to drop because everything is going on in the market right now. So I would say, sure, use seller financing on it and then finance out of it with an FHA or another kind of loan that will allow you to higher leverage, if you will. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to go to 90% loan to value, but that means that you can, if you bought it at 60% with a 20%, seller carry, you can finance out of that.
Yeah.
And you may even be able to get the seller to discount the carry back and say, hey, look, I'm thinking about refinancing, but I need a better deal on this loan. Maybe you carry 20, I can only pay you 15. Will you take it? Otherwise, I'm going to wait another 5 years. You know, so it's a way to leverage. But I mean, when your first house, you kind of have to leverage. You don't have a choice. I mean, most people don't have, unless their parents are rich, don't have a big chunk of cash to put down. Sure. I mean, I'm sure, if you think back at your first house, think back at my first house was an FHA deal. Yeah. That's the way you get started.
Right. Yeah. I remember my parents, they bought their home in 64 in LA for $22,000. And, then years later, 60 years later, it was worth about $800,000. That was a great first investment.
Exactly. And most wealth building starts with your home. Yes. That's where it starts.
I think if you buy moderate on the first home, you can turn that first home into a rental and upgrade to your dream home, maybe the second home. So in that way you could build that way to start, getting into something moderate and not exceeding your, living, like say, for example, if you're approved for $500,000, start with a $300,000 home, give yourself a little breathing room and ability to save, to invest in another home in the future, right?
Well, exactly. One of the issues you're having today for trying to list property is that you've got someone, and I'm in a good example, I've got a 3% interest rate on my mortgage. What am I going to go and buy into? So I'm going to buy a house that's worth half as much as the one I'm selling with the same mortgage payment. Yeah. And that's another thing that keeps the market kind of at that high rate, because people aren't able to sell. They'll be losing if they sold their property, right? Exactly. And unless you're transferred, you have some kind of a business or a transfer because of work, a lot of them just aren't, there's no reason for them to sell. What do you do? Where are you going to, I'm at a point right now in my life where I want to downsize a little bit. My kids are telling me, how come you don't sell the house? Where am I going to go? Yeah. What are you going to do? Do you want to down? So I sell my house, which is a larger home. I sell my house and I buy one with 1,000 square feet less, let's say. But the payment's the same. I've got a big bunch of cash, but now what do I do with it? Right. So that's the problem that a lot of homeowners are facing. And one of the reasons that a lot of them are not releasing their house or taking their house to market. What are you going to do? Yeah. This is a really, really exciting topic. We could talk forever and ever about the market and all the exciting things happening, but I really appreciate what you shared with us in the gems, literally the gems story. It's been so many things I know you've seen over the years, and you have a lot of wisdom to share, and I thank you for sharing some of that with us today. Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to Crown and Keys, where wealth meets wisdom and legacy is built with intention. If today's episode inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, subscribe, and leave a review. And if you're ready to take your wealth strategy to the next level, visit crownandkeyspodcast.com to align your finances with your future. Until next time, stay aligned, stay empowered, and keep building your legacy. Your keys are in your hand. See you soon.